Good evening. Tensions in Lebanon have escalated as Israeli aggression intensifies, leading to a significant rise in fatalities. Join us as we track how the ongoing war has amplified concerns over regional stability, with heavy civilian casualties and heightened fears of broader instability.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
الوضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Local Lebanese media have reported that a third Israeli air raid on the Maraisa neighborhood in Ansar. This followed additional strikes between Batulia and Ain Bal in Majdal and Burj Kalawiya. Two more raids targeted Khirbet Salim and Kafadunin, accompanied by Israeli artillery shelling on the town of Khayyam in Marjiyun. Israeli airstrikes have destroyed two historic buildings in Nabatea in southern Lebanon, the home of former Minister Rafiq Shaheen. A significant landmark in Al Midan was reduced to rubble, burying decades of political history. Another strike targeted Kemal Daher's house, a recently restored heritage site that once hosted the South Lebanon Cultural Council. Earlier, an airstrike also destroyed a historic building near the ancient Baalbek Castle in eastern Lebanon. Plumes of smoke have been seen rising from the southern Lebanese village of Khayyam, while explosions were heard near Marjiyun, close to the border with Israel. At least 7 were killed and 46 others injured in an initial toll following Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon's coastal city of Tyre, Lebanese health ministry said. Israel's occupation military said it continues to operate in southern Lebanon to dismantle Hezbollah infrastructure. So tensions continue to mount along Lebanon's southern border as Israeli airstrikes target sites in the country's south, sparking a fierce response from Hezbollah.
Lebanon remains tense as escalating hostilities with Israel raise concerns for civilian safety along the border. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes targeted multiple sites, and adding that it is closely monitoring developments. In response, Hezbollah heavy significant shelling against Israeli occupation military outposts, marking one of the conflict's sharpest escalations. The exchanges underscore the bolstered Israeli military presence along Lebanon's southern border, fueling fears of a wider confrontation that could deepen Lebanon's involvement in the regional conflict. The humanitarian situation in southern Lebanon is worsening, with thousands displaced and border hospitals facing critical shortages as they struggle to care for the increasing number of injured. Local organizations warn of an impending humanitarian crisis if violence persists. In Beirut, Lebanese officials have appealed to the United Nations and the international community for intervention, calling for an immediate ceasefire and protections for civilians. As events unfold, Lebanese citizens brace for potential escalation, hoping that diplomatic efforts will restore calm before the conflict intensifies further.
Now, to discuss this with us, we are joined from Beirut by the military and strategic expert, Brigadier General Akram Siriawi. Welcome to Qnews. Thanks for being there with us. In the past few hours, Israel has intensified its attacks on the southern suburbs of Beirut. Why do you think that is at this very moment?
تحياتي لك ولجميع المشاهدين.
Greetings, everyone. In fact, there is an equation here carried out by Israel. The more Israel is bombed, the more Beirut is bombed. But the resistance in Lebanon didn't bomb Tel Aviv. It bombed a military base in Tel Aviv. And in fact, the resistance until now only targets Israeli military centers. But it never targeted settlements, Israeli settlements, whether in Tel Aviv or outside of it, whether directly or indirectly, unless there is a military presence in these areas. However, it seems that Israel has exhausted all the military goals of it in Lebanon. They have bombed all the Hezbollah centers that they know of, whether through intelligence reports or through any other way. And they started now a different phase, which is a phase of complete and utter demolishing of civilian areas. Right now, they are demolishing, bombing and shelling villages in order to make these villages void of all housing, buildings, and inhabitants. This is happening in the Beirut, Dahia, or suburb, and the Al-Bika villages. The Israeli occupation forces, in fact, are now creating massacres in these areas. And in fact, when Israelis were asked about the targeting of these civilian areas that they know for sure are void of any military presence, the Israelis said, when they were asked about this, that they were targeting these areas in order to just disrupt the trust and confidence between Hezbollah and Lebanese nationals. And so it is evident that what Israel is doing right now is psychological warfare. They are trying to demoralize Hezbollah and the Lebanese nationals as well. They have another goal. In fact, the Israelis want to want Hezbollah to incur the responsibility of the suburb and the Lebanese village damage. And in fact, the Lebanese nationals and the Lebanese state or government are the ones that are going to incur the loss and damage of these operations and their outcomes. And so, right now, and through Hochstein paper, which is a paper that was leaked to the government, state was leaked between what was happening between the government of Lebanon and Netanyahu.
Now, of course, a few days ago, we saw Donald Trump's victory in the United States in the presidential elections. Does his entrance to the White House in January mean that between now and then, there's a chance of a ceasefire, or will we have to wait until after he's in the White House? And what's the likelihood of it?
Right now, the States is in a transitional phase. In fact, the previous ruling authority is not really motivated to do any achievements. And the coming President Donald Trump needs some time to have his ducks in a row, to put his ducks in a row and to actually regularize and look into the statuses of the American foreign policy and the American relations with all countries. In fact, it seems that there is an attempt that China is going to carry out in order to terminate the war in Lebanon. And I think that this move, if it took place by the Biden administration, it'll be just to, represent some kind of a historical move that the Biden administration can terminate its presidential term with. And in fact, Biden's Lebanese associate or assistant Mossad Boulos said that Trump is going to start working on terminating the war in Lebanon on his very first day, but we can't really count on these claims because until now Netanyahu does not seem to budge about any kind of American effort to terminate or to stop the war, to create a ceasefire. In fact, the goals that have been announced, whether in the Gaza war or relative to the Lebanon war, in fact, relative to the Gaza war, they said that they were aiming to terminate Hamas and to restore hostages. But in fact, Netanyahu said that he wants to return the settlers from Israel to the south of Litani. And so we can see that Netanyahu is going to get into a phase that is characterized by extreme escalation, because Netanyahu is never going to admit failure in his military operations. And in fact, the Galin, after he exited the government, and Hart ibn Hanivi and some chief Israeli officials, they all said that this war has become extremely costly because it doesn't have a compass, it doesn't have well-set values or goals, And so the perpetuating of these Israeli military operations are going to put a toll on the Israeli state and are not going to be fruitful at all. As well, when it comes to the land incursion of Gaza from the end of the Israeli occupation forces, the Israelis found out that this land incursion is going to be extremely costly, and they are going to, in fact, exert a lot of efforts in order to land in villages that are 1,000 kilometers away from the borders. And so it seems that Netanyahu might resort to some kind of political settlement. However, no political settlement is going to take place unless it is a settlement that guarantees the goals, the Israeli goals for the Israeli government and their achievement.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. That's a military expert and strategic expert, Brigadier General Akram Siriawi. Thank you so much. UN Deputy Spokesperson Candice Diel has said that the UN interim force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, has come under attack 40 times since September the 30th, with 8 confirmed from the Israeli side. The UN force reported another Israeli assault on its position, saying that the Israeli occupation military's deliberate and direct destruction of its property was a flagrant violation of international law. The Israeli occupation military denied any activity after UN forces contacted it to protest, despite UNIFIL publishing footage of the incident online. A massive fire broke out in Beirut's El Hamra neighborhood, engulfing more than a dozen cars in a parking lot and damaging a nearby building. Lebanese authorities reported that a power generator explosion triggered a series of blasts, though the exact cause of the fire remains under investigation. Civil defense teams swiftly arrived at the scene as thick black smoke billowed into the sky, prompting the evacuation of nearby buildings. Now, for more on this, we are joined from occupied Jerusalem by the international law professor Munir Nusseibeh. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. How do you view the ongoing Israeli violations against UNIFIL forces in Lebanon?
Unfortunately, the continued violation of Israel is due to the lack of accountability. Israel should have been punished not only for its attacks on the UN, whether it's the UNIFIL in Lebanon or the UNRWA in Gaza and in the rest of Palestine. It should have been punished a long time ago for all of these actions. However, Israel has enjoyed impunity as a result of the full support of a number of countries headed by the United States, which not only gives immunity to Israel in the United Nations system, but also continues to support Israel with weapons, with money, and with everything that is needed to continue the genocide in the Gaza Strip and the huge, significant violations in Lebanon. This is why Israel has been attacking the UNIFIL forces since the beginning of its offensive on Lebanon. The UN has warned and expressed its condemnation and concern a number of times now since this has started, but it's not stopping at all. Now there has been a suggestion within the UN General Assembly to maybe suspend or downgrade Israel's status in the UN as a result of not only the genocide in the Gaza Strip, but also the lack of respect of the UN. Israel has been showing clear animosity towards the United Nations agencies, and the reality is, as long as there are no consequences for its attacks on UN agencies, these attacks are going to only continue and grow. We also heard recently that Israel has enacted a law that stops the operations of the UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Work Agency for the Palestinian Refugees. They have stopped it in areas under its mandate. This is a very dangerous action, and it actually contributes to the starvation of our people in the Gaza Strip.
And Professor, you talk about a potential threat from the UN in downgrading Israel. Do you think they would care?
Well, the UN is composed by a number of states. The Security Council obviously is controlled by the very powerful permanent 5 members: UN, US, France, UK, China, and Russia. So there is nothing much that you can expect from the UN Security Council. However, in the General Assembly, the atmosphere is very different. The General Assembly is composed mainly of nations from the Global South, nations that are anti-colonial, and they think differently, they act differently. I'm not saying that I have a feeling or an understanding that during the next weeks this might come. However, I know that there is an idea that is being discussed and examined within the United Nations. I think it's logical. I think it makes sense because certainly a nation that does not respect the United Nations order, the decisions of the Security Council, the decisions of the General Assembly, the operations. Israel, has not even allowed visas for most of the UN human rights system workers and experts. They almost boycott every mechanism in the UN, and they expect the rest of the world to abide by Israel's rules as opposed to Israel abiding by international law. So the idea is certainly an idea that can be conducted. We know that during apartheid South Africa, such an action was actually done. South Africa was unseated in the General Assembly. This idea is being examined right now, but I don't know whether it will be actually implemented now or later. It depends on the will of the majority of the states in the world. But the fact that the General Assembly is not controlled by the US and the Permanent 5 means that there is a much bigger chance of passing such resolutions through the General Assembly as opposed to the Security Council.
Okay, so we're talking about the General Assembly, but the international community as a whole, has largely remained silent when it comes to the Israeli attacks on UNIFIL forces. Why do you think this is?
I think it's mainly, there has been criticism, so it's not totally silent. There has been criticism, there have been statements, but there has been no action. And the lack of action is actually what we have been used to. Israel is shielded by a number of powerful states in the world, which means that countries that want to take action against it in the international community usually hesitate to do so. Until they see that there is a strong movement in this direction. But I don't think that this silence will continue forever. I should maybe note here that attacking UN forces, peacekeeping forces, it invokes different types of responsibilities. On the one hand, it invokes individual criminal responsibility, which means that at some point, an Israeli official and decision maker might be held accountable for the attacks on UN forces because it is defined as a war crime, but it also invokes state responsibility. I believe that the UN would at a certain point invoke state responsibility on Israel, demand that Israel pays compensation for all of the losses that have been endured, whether by the UNIFIL itself, or by other agencies of the United Nations, including the UNRWA. Israel has destroyed most of the schools that belong to UNRWA, has attacked a lot of UN workers in the Gaza Strip, and until now, the United Nations has not been able to act upon that. We know that Israel is treated differently. Israel is treated as a state above international law, but I don't think this will stay forever. We know that the genocide case of South Africa versus Israel is now in process in the International Court of Justice. I think it will indeed bring about certain consequences on the state of Israel. We have the other important case, which is Nicaragua versus Germany. It invokes third state responsibility on genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Together these cases will bring about different understanding of the role of the United Nations when it comes to war crimes, crimes against humanity, and other grave violations of international law. So I think the future will be different. Yes, true, today we haven't seen consequences. The international community has been maybe, if not silent, but unable to act on its responsibility. But I believe that this will not be the case forever.
Thank you so much for joining me on the program. Munir Nusseibeh, an international law professor. Thank you very much for being here on Q News with us once again. Now that brings us to the end of our special coverage of escalating tensions in Lebanon. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.